Hi, I'm Reggie Turner. I'm here with Jim Miller and Terrence Moore. FlipSide starts right now. Welcome to the show. Tonight we're joined by our state senator, Mr. Paul Corderman. Paul, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Appreciate you having me here.
Yeah, so I know I missed last week or two when we had an autopsy of kind of the election. Pretty much all of our predictions went bust.
Excuse me?
Well, you did fair. I mean, you did better than what you've done in recent years. So how about that?
I hit the presidential.
You did hit the presidential
and the spread.
Oh yeah. We both said it was going to be settled one way or the other, but you were right on that. So kudos to you for finally getting yourself back in the game.
That's a steak dinner I don't have to buy. Paul.
All right.
Right there.
I didn't have my trusty calculator out, so my calculations were a little bit off.
Always an excuse.
But
Always
I will not let that happen on any other election cycle. But Paul,
Sure.
just kind of jumping into the election and things of that nature, you're doing your own autopsy of Governor Hogan's bid for the Senate. What do you think happened there?
Well, I think it really came down to, it was the messaging that you saw from Alston Brooks. I like Angela Alston Brooks, a person, met her, actually didn't serve with her, but my first year when I served in the House of Delegates, she was the state's attorney for Prince George's, and she came into the Judiciary Committee quite often. So I got to meet her and work with her several times. I think the difference, though, in the campaign was the messaging that they had about we can't lose the Senate. That's what they kept pushing.
Right.
Didn't push so much, and look, it was a smart move by her campaign team. You didn't see a whole lot of message as far as like what she was going to do, what her ideas were, her plans were. All that. It was just we can't have that guy because we can't have the Republicans.
Right.
Well, and I think specifically, and I will tell you, more than a couple voters have told me that they were afraid that if the Republicans gained the Senate, that would be the end of women's rights.
Absolutely, and I think that's my whole point. I think that's what really drove her. I think she probably would have won anyways, or probably maybe closer, potentially, if they would have gone a different route as far as the campaign. But look, you run campaigns to win campaigns, and I think it was a very smart part on her team as far as that messaging. Because again, to your point, I think that one of the most powerful commercials they had, which is along the lines of what you said someone you spoke with was, they had people in there that said, hey, I voted for Larry Hogan before, I voted for Larry Hogan, but I won't vote for him this time because we can't lose the Senate. And so I think that was really the difference, just that messaging throughout the campaign that really, look, it was a little bit more even than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, me too.
I don't know what the final number was. You guys, I'm sure, probably have that, but it was over 10, I think.
It was big.
10 percentage points, it is.
And there was only one person on the set that said it would be big.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Thank you, Terrence.
Thank you. it was not Terrence. Yes, it was. It was not Terrence. Terrence said 4 points. I said 8.
Yeah. I think it was over 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, the person that I talked to, similar to what you said, I love Larry Hogan. I voted for him both times as governor. Can't vote for him this time because.
And what the interesting thing was is that messaging worked, but it wasn't even accurate because
No,
the
it
Senate was going
wasn't.
to flip anyways.
Right.
But again, that's the strategy that her team used, and kudos to her for doing that.
I think it was dual messaging. I think there was an educated voter that understood don't want to see the Senate flip, and tagged into that. But I think the attack was on women's rights, and I think that was the general message that people kind of gravitated to. Honestly, I don't think.
Well, in Maryland they did.
Right.
Nowhere else.
Right. If you poll a lot of the voters, and it was also a question that was also tied to that on the ballot as well. So I think they hit the same thing from different perspectives, but I think the greater population, went with the whole thing that she was a woman and she stood for women's rights. And I think that really pushed over the top.
Yeah, and the other thing is Hogan stayed on defense. He couldn't stay on offense at all. I mean, he tried to go in on the tax issue and you can't trust her, but that never resonated.
It didn't.
And the thing is that he started out the campaign saying that he would be independent and he wasn't going to vote for Trump. And then he's in private meetings saying, no, but President Trump supports me, right? So he was kind of going back and forth in that messaging. He couldn't get it right. He couldn't dance the line. And like I said, MAGA wasn't going to show up and vote for him.
He switched lanes several times. I think he was on the fence. I think he was trying to appease too many people instead of staying a hard line of this is who I am, this is what I want to go. You know, even when we talked about the women's rights, he kind of stayed quiet at first, then he said no. Then all of a sudden he started campaigning with all his grandchildren and daughters and commercials, and it just seemed like he was just trying to, like you said, he was on
trying
the
to find a
defense.
message that would
Right.
resonate.
He was throwing stuff against the wall, see what stuck.
Yeah, and I think he just should have stayed with his early message. If he wanted to be more competitive, he stayed with his early message and kept his path and kept going straight.
You know, one of the things that I wanted to ask you about, though, is the last time the Republican won a presidential election in Maryland was George H.W. Bush in 1988. 1988? Yeah. Is this what we can expect for the foreseeable future, or was Trump just the wrong candidate?
Well, I think what I was going to say there before, which leads into that question, I think what was really clear from, as we're still talking about the Hogan, also brooks into the Trump thing, the real difference between a federal and a state campaign, as opposed to, you know, a statewide candidate within the state of Maryland is the governor, you know, or a federal race, you know, running for the U.S. Senate. It's just the differences of what those races look like. To answer your question, again, compare the two of them. We're talking about numbers. Compare how Hogan did throughout statewide and Trump did. I mean, Hogan did much better than Trump did statewide. He got crossover votes. Obviously, just didn't get enough of them. I mean, he got independents. He got folks from the Democrats to vote for him. Clearly, again, not enough. But he did way more than Trump did. Look, the reality is Maryland is a very deep blue state, and so for Donald Trump to resonate in the state of Maryland, that's just not going to happen. So part of it is, I think, to your point, just the candidate themselves, but I think part of it also is just the difference of federal and state elections.
Well, I think the thing that I find interesting now is that now this week you're seeing it floating that will Hogan run for governor again?
He could.
Right?
Yeah.
Because obviously if you're reading the numbers, you can say that he has enough popularity there, and when you're talking about the difference between a state race and a federal race, that might be a window for him.
Yeah, I think he's put a stat out, because you've already seen a lot of things already that I know the state parties put out, I think even the Hogan team may have put out, of he ran better than Trump than any other candidate in any other state, in the country. Just to show his kind of separation, how he was able to get, voters on both sides. Which, to your question, is that a setup for 2 years from now? And I guess we'll just have to wait and see how that plays out.
And I think, again, it just has to be solidified. Is it flip-flopping, or is it he can work across the aisle?
Right.
It's the message that comes across that. And I think in this campaign, it looked a little bit of unsureness. He was on the fence with a lot of issues, but we've known him to be able to work both sides of the aisle when he was the governor. So I think that's going to be more receptive for him to be able to be a little bit more leaning both Republican and Democrat, that may benefit him when he goes into the governor race. But
if he goes into the
governor's race, which I don't believe he would, and I don't think he should.
I don't either.
I don't really think he should.
And I think that Westmore has some backing from some of the centrist Republicans, and unless the economy gets just completely off the rails, nobody's blaming inflation that I know of on Westmore. Nobody is. Go ahead.
I wouldn't say necessarily inflation, but I imagine it's going to be something we're going to talk about soon, and maybe we'll talk about it here now. When we look at the current economy, the Maryland economy, and how that's changed over the last couple of years, is that all on Westmore? Probably not. But Westmore's the governor,
right?
And he's been there for 2 years.
He gets the credit.
We still got 2 more years, so you get the good with the bad. And the Maryland economy right now, guys, it's not good.
No, it's
not good at all.
Well, and if President Trump does as he says and significantly downsizes the federal government, where do a lot of those employees come from?
That is a real concern, and a valid concern of why you've already seen Governor Moore announce he's already put a team together, some folks to kind of push back on some of those things. Because, all right, here's the reality. We had a briefing about a week ago by the Spending and Affordability Committee that basically does forecasts and updates all the numbers and everything. We all saw probably the headline, $2.7 billion structural deficit.
Right.
That actually balloons out to almost $6 billion in the next couple of years. The economy for Maryland right now is ranked 50th in the country, which is obviously dead last. To your point, we have 160,000 federal workers. And that's just federal workers per se. That doesn't include all the defense contractors, all the other ancillary jobs that come with federal government. The Maryland economy has become so reliant on government and has not, I shouldn't say has not, has unfortunately kind of drove some business out that you're seeing those ramifications here now. And if Trump does what he's talking about of downsizing the federal government, it's got the potential to put a real additional hurt on the Maryland economy.
And now people are also leaving for Virginia, West Virginia as well, which is also, impacting the economy as well. Those are a lot of high-paying jobs. And you talk about some of that government, a lot of that is on the borderlines of the state of Maryland as well, especially more so down to the Virginia. And, you talk about him having support from Republicans. Sooner or later, he has to raise taxes. It's going to happen. He can't manipulate it with fees for too long, right? We see it kind of happening and looking for fees to kind of generate some more revenue, but I can't see it as a long-term solution, especially what's going to be happening federally.
How many fees were changed last year? 400?
There's like 300 or 400 over the last 2 years that
A lot.
that have happened.
Some like tripled.
Yeah, well, the biggest one that caught a lot of people's attention, we talked about it right after the session, but people really saw it in their mailbox this year, was vehicle registration. We knew it when it happened. I was like, people are not going to be happy about this. And it's people's vehicle registration essentially doubled.
Yep.
And so that's a big. Anyone who's got more than one vehicle, which a lot of people do.
Yep.
1, 2,
Business
3
owners.
vehicles, it starts adding up pretty quick.
Paul, if we kind of broaden out from, the state of Maryland has its own issues. And, we've talked about on the show, we felt that, at least I felt that a lot of our local issues were masked by the money that we had coming in the midst of COVID. Now that that's dried up and that's gone away, you have issues at the state level. And there's, in our county and in our city, there's been resistance to raise taxes. What type of pressure do you think that's going to put on things locally?
It could have somewhat of a trickle-down effect. I think part of so this is like the benefit of, well, there's a lot of benefits of being in Western Maryland, but when we're talking about the economy and we're talking about Maryland's economy, we have some folks that work down the road, so to speak. We have folks that telecommute and things of that nature. We have a much more diverse economy in Washington County than I'd say than the central part of the state does, where we're not as reliant on that federal workforce. Look, good, bad, and different logistical opportunities that have come up here. All the different variety of different things that go into our economy. I don't think you'll see that much difference as far as if there's an impact from the federal workforce. To your point, though, we haven't seen that issue crop up yet, really, as far as when you start talking about structural issues within our county and city, government budgets per se. There's always things they want to do more with, but you can make an argument of, do we need to be increasing revenues because things are balanced, but are we giving enough to education? Do we need to build some more schools? Are there other things that we should be doing that we've kind of kicked the can down the road on?
In previous shows, talking with Julie Rahm and others, we also learned that we're a laggard. We are normally 6 to 18 months behind what's happening at the federal or state level. So
That's true.
Some of these things may not be seen as of yet, but my concern and how I look at it is that we have a higher concentration of poverty than other parts of the state. So the effects here could be much more devastating.
They definitely could be if you start talking about reducing services and things of that nature, which will really impact some of those folks in need. I would agree with that for certain.
Let's take a break and then talk some more.
Sounds like what we do best. Stay with us and we'll have more FlipSide after the break. Welcome back to the show. Senator Corderman, thank you for staying with us. Let's jump into some state issues. Jim, I'll let you start with the first question.
Well, let's go back to the budget deficit.
Sure.
I mean, what are the opportunities? Where do you see opportunities to either cut spending, or is it all about raising taxes?
I think it's going to be probably a balance of both. To Terrence's point earlier, we've gotten to a point now you can't do some of these little things. In years past, you'd see, I used to call it, kind of voodoo math. We'd come down there and there'd be a structural deficit of $1 billion, but by the end of the session, that was all gone. But wait till next year, come back and it would repeat. These numbers have gotten so big now, you can't do these one-time fixes because, like last year was $1 billion. We didn't contribute to the rainy day fund and didn't put as much in the pension system and these different things that we should be doing, but you can get away with them once or twice. Not a huge deal, but not something you want to repeat. But it's only a one-time fix, so that structural problem continues to grow. To your point, the three biggest things that are driving that structural deficit, one is Kerwin. the education. That's about 35% of it. The next one is entitlements, which a lot of that is Medicaid. So Medicaid has grown in the state of Maryland pretty significantly over the last couple of years. A lot of it happened during the pandemic. A lot of folks went on to Medicaid, and during that time, you weren't able to remove them from the list, per se. 1 in 5 Marylanders are on Medicaid right now. It's 20% of the state. And that's a shared cost. 50% for the state, 50% for the federal government. Obviously, healthcare costs are going up like everything else, so that is going up. I mean, we have an $800 million deficiency in Medicaid alone. And the last one is just salaries and things of that nature. And that's when you're looking through all the different things that government are, have we grown government too much, and things of that nature. Those 3 things make up about 75% of that structural deficit. The big one, though, back to is the Kerwin plan. The majority party has recognized also that we may have to kind of slow back some of these things. And so I think that's going to be the first area of focus, just because that number is like $3.5 to $4 billion right off the top. That's going to add to that deficiency over the next couple of years.
Do you feel like, we talked a couple of weeks, maybe it was even a month or so ago, about the increase in revenue from cannabis sales. Do you feel like that will continue to rise at a substantial pace over the next year or two, or will that level off?
It may rise some. I mean, at a certain point it'll level off. Honestly, I haven't looked at it. Terrence, you might be a better insight on some of that, some of the work I know you've been involved with. But that number, what it is, it's a decent sized number, don't get me wrong. But when we're talking these billions and billions with a B, it's just it's around the edge a little bit. It's not
a rounding area. Rounding area, that's true.
And as you point out, it will level off because there's still some controls that need to go in place. And those constrictions that come with those controls will regulate who can sell, how it can be sold, and also some of the gray market that we're seeing out there in the streets as well. So I think that's going to happen not only in this session, but sessions that follow to really kind of pull back some of the controls or put some of these controls in place that should have came out with the initial legislation. I
think the real question is, if we increase revenues, when I say we as the General Assembly, not me per se, but just put that out there. If the General Assembly decides to increase revenues, what are they going to do? I mean, last year they introduced a bill everyone got upset about, and understandably so. It was basically to tax every service in the state. Your haircut's getting taxed now. Your loan service is getting taxed now. Your legal fees are getting taxed now. All those. Now it would have brought in like a couple $1 billion. That they're going to look at that again. Is it going to be all of them? I don't know. They might pick and choose.
Yeah, they were going to reduce the overall percentage by 1%, but they were going to tax service revenue.
So I think you're going to see that come back. I think you're going to see iGaming come back. That was talked about last year. I think you're going to see these things that have been kind of around the edges for the last couple of years, a really more deep dive into them. Because again, back to the beginning of the conversation, there's going to have to be something substantial done to make up almost a $3 billion number. That's not a small number where it's like, all right, we put $500 million in the rainy day fund. We won't do that this year. We're still $2.5 billion short. So
with these realities on the ground, has your caucus talked about what's palatable for you guys?
Well, I think a lot of it is, I won't say a wait and see approach per se, because there have been conversations with leadership already on the other side as far as what they're looking at. We've tried to have conversations locally with, particularly when we talk about Kerwin, with our local Board of Educations and our local superintendents. We had a conversation yesterday with our delegation with the superintendent of Washington County of what do they see as far as some opportunities, understanding that, hey, Kerwin's not sustainable in the model it's in right now, but as they're looking at it, because again, they probably know more about it than anybody, 2 or 3 areas we might be able to slow down and things of that nature. And so that's really what we've been looking at, is working within those conversations to try to identify some things, and then we can work hopefully with leadership of the General Assembly to come up with something that's palatable to everybody. Our focus is more on reducing spending. I would say on the other side, there's more of a focus, and not so much in the Senate, but more in the House, of increasing revenues. They've been on record before in the House last year and this year. Delegate Barnes, who's a great friend of mine, and Delegate Atterbury, we need to increase revenue. So I think you're going to have a little bit of that push again, obviously. The Senate President said everything's on the table. So I think that's a signal that we probably are going to see some revenue increases.
And you mentioned Kerwin, and a big part of that funding was the kind of the regulating of salaries of teachers. Yep. So that's going to be a difficult issue to have that conversation, because a lot of that first upfront part of spend is to make sure that salaries are regulated across the state. Do you think that's going to be a difficult conversation, or is that something that you're going to agree on quickly.
I think it's going to be more of a difficult conversation from the majority party standpoint. From our side of it was, told you. Told you this was going to happen.
Yeah,
3
exactly.
4 years ago when we were arguing about this, we said this isn't sustainable. Colonel was built out over about 10 years, had the first couple of years. We said this is going to be a $5 or $6 billion, and by year 5 or 6, no, we'll never get that high. Revenues will increase, everything will be fine, we'll be okay. And so I think it will be a harder conversation because, again, look, the reality is not all of Colonel, a big part of this, you talk about teacher salaries, it was directed towards the teachers' union. And so, the teachers' union and the majority party are more aligned with each other. And so I think that's going to be the harder conversation amongst them. And you said earlier about how the governor's kind of danced around some of these things over the last couple of years of it's the largest union in our state. And so that's going to be, I think that's where the difficult conversation is going to be.
And the controlling union for votes as well,
All right. So,
if he wants to get reelected.
The other area where it occurs to me that Maryland could lose revenue is gas tax. I mean, with more and more electric vehicles or hybrid vehicles or high efficiency vehicles, that's got to hurt.
oh, we're already seeing it. So when we talk about transportation and the CTP, which is the Consolidated Transportation Plan, the revenues in there aren't growing at the clip they had forecasted. To your point, gas tax is low. It's going down. Is it all EVs? It's part of it, but there's a variety of different things. But it's not at the level. Well, unfortunately, a lot of the metrics within the economy, so to speak, the gas tax, sales and use tax is basically flat. Income tax and corporate tax one of them's going down a little bit, the other one's, but it's just not growing. It's pretty stagnant. And so, if our revenues are flat, but our spending plan is continuing to go like that, I'm not the numbers guy. It's probably this guy over here. It just doesn't work out.
Well, yeah, I mean, forget about EVs, forget about all of that. Look at the number of people that are work from home now. I mean, I used to fill my gas tank twice a week. Now I fill it twice a month.
Sure. Yeah, no, there's absolutely truth to that as far as the gas tax and the impact it's had on transportation. When we really dive into the transportation conversation, I think with that conversation, and the Secretary of Transportation has said it, and I applaud him for this, we have to find a way to fund transit. That's the issue. Jim Kirchwold has a great slide he presented the other day showing how all the different monies, where they go from the gas tax, and the amount that goes to transit, and the amount that goes to our roads, and obviously people that are driving and filling up their gas tank, they're the ones who are contributing to the fund, but there's so much subsidy that goes to transit, it's not equitable at all. That's why we don't have money in our transportation trust fund, because we are subsidizing transit to a huge amount.
And by subsidizing, you mean the riders are not covering the cost?
Oh, no. If you had that, it would cost, I'm making a number up, but it wouldn't be $5, I'll tell you that. It wouldn't be feasible to run the system because people wouldn't be able to pay to get on the metro. The cost is just so high. So.
Well, Senator Corderman, last summer you kind of set the whole county on fire with your letter
About that
to
one.
the city in regards to kind of the opioid, the crime, and different issues.
Thank you for that, by the way.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
Now you are about to have new partners to work with. There was a lot of conversation sparked. I think this administration spent basically the rest of their term answering your letter. Like every week, they were answering your letter.
Yeah, they had orientation today. I hope the letter was in the binder.
I mean, your letter has became the Bible, right? In regards to what needed to be read and answered. How do you feel about the conversations that have kind of went through the city and the county since then, the partners that have come in and talked to you, whether on the record or behind the scenes? Like, how do you feel about where things stand and just the opportunity going forward?
So I guess a number of different things here. First off, the letter itself. I appreciate what you said, Jim. I stand behind that. It did exactly what I wanted to do. It created a conversation.
Absolutely.
That was the intent of it. And even there was more so out of it because, as you said, it was talked about every week. I didn't think that was going to happen. I didn't think they were going to sit down and dissect it every single week. But that's okay because it kept the conversation going.
Yes.
It kept, different folks coming in. And, I think it goes back to, and it's not the letter itself. That's just one part of when we're talking about elections or anything like that. But we've been talking about the federal elections, things of that nature. Look, all across the board, we saw it. People want to change. Whether it was from the president, whether it was from the school board, the city council, forget about the politics of it. You got a new mayor and 3 new council members. That's a change. So whether you're Republican or Democrat, people said, we want to change the city of Hagerstown. I hope that the folks that are coming in there recognize that, and I hope the 2 members that are there recognize that as well. Because we can debate the issues and the policy and which direction we want to go, but we have to recognize the city of Hagerstown wants to go in a different direction. The school board wants to go in a different direction. I mean, you had 2 incumbents, longtime incumbents that were knocked out. And so,
maybe that's considered as a warning shot to the county that has an election in 2 years as well.
yeah, no, I think it's a very valid point. I think it's cliche to say change when you talk about elections. It's all about that, but I think there was no more better example than this election here. Not just at the national level, but right here locally in the city of Hagerstown and our school board, that people want to change. And so, to continue to answer your question, look, I have not had an opportunity to meet all the new members that are coming to the city council. I look forward to working with them. I was interviewed yesterday by another publication, and they were asking about the previous administration, and the letter came up, and I said, look, here's the reality. I still have not sat down with that administration. I sent them a letter. Was never invited. There was a conversation a couple weeks ago I heard that they talked about possibly inviting me in, but I was like, well, they decided we'll do it after the election. Well, I think some members there thought that they would still be there after the election, and obviously that wasn't the case. So, look, at the end of the day, I do what I do because I want to help our community. And at a certain point, we had this conversation again, and I keep referring to yesterday. I know when your viewers see this, it might be a few days after. We had our all-day delegation day here recently. And we met with the city and the county and a couple of other things. And I brought up water, because water's been a big issue here in our community. And I said this to the city council, a lot of them were the outgoing ones, because we kind of got back and forth into it. And I said, look, at a certain point in time, we got to put our big girl and big boy pants on and figure this out and have a conversation. We don't have to agree on it, but you got to talk about it. We have to talk about it. And that's the position I come from. Look, may have upset some people with the letter. That is what it is. But if we can't sit down and talk about it, why are we doing this and what we do? Like these new members that ran, I hope that they ran because they want to make Hagerstown better. And I know they did because that's why they ran. And I look forward to working with them.
I'll say this. I hope it's more than talk. I commend you for starting and sparking a conversation. But you said something. How were you not invited in to have a conversation?
You were talked at.
Right. And there was a lot of conversation on social media. There were a lot of I like to, and forgive me, busy work it looked like, of bringing everybody else in to talk about what you said, but no one spoke to you.
No, and I saw a couple of them, Terrence, I mean to cut you off. No. Well, we think he meant this. Or we think he meant that.
Exactly.
Senator's alluding to this. I was like, well, guys, if you just invited me in, I can tell you exactly what it meant. So, apologize.
No, you went exactly where I wanted to go. Time is of the essence. And there's no time to assume what is said. Break down relationships further, get in the room, have the conversations in the best interest of the people, period. And do it early and do it often. Like as a constituent, I think that's all we should expect. And I think that's a fair expectation. And I'm glad you initiated that, but you can't have a conversation on one side.
That's right. And I had an opportunity, well, didn't have an opportunity. I spoke with a council member, and I'll leave it unnamed, not too long after the letter. And they said to me, hey, haven't seen you in the meetings, you haven't shown up yet. I was like, well, you haven't invited me. I was like, you want me to just walk in and just crash your meeting? I was like, I don't think that's going to go over too well either. I was like, I'll tell you what though, you send me an invitation to come put me on the agenda, I'll be there, absolutely. Still waiting for it.
And I'm optimistic on both sides, so I'm not calling anyone out. Sure. I'm just saying a new page is turned. Let's start it off on a good note for the best interest of everybody. So I'm looking forward to that.
Well, I know that the new council is going to be in by the end of the month, correct?
I believe that. Yep. I think they get sworn in here pretty soon.
Yeah, I would just hope that there's some conversations that are had before the legislative session started, because if there's anything that can be moved forward at the state level during, even though these folks are just kind of coming in, I would hope that there's some conversations of some things that you can take back to Annapolis to see that where we could get help.
Yeah, to that point, there absolutely will be. When we met with the city and the school board, using those two examples because there was such turnover in both those, we made it a point as a delegation with both those groups to tell those folks, hey, look, we would like to meet with you guys again here in a couple weeks once your new people kind of get settled in, to be able to have a conversation, make sure the things that are presented from the old administration are still the same initiatives and goals of this administration, and to start that dialogue and continue that work.
Couple things follow up, and then we'll take a break, Reggie. But first of all, what I love about what you were doing, bad news doesn't get better with age. I don't know whose quote that was, but it is so true. And number two, what I see out of your letter and out of the couple of meetings that have followed is the fact that we have more people getting engaged. Because let's face it, the city police force, the state of Maryland, the city government, the county government, it's going to take all of us to fix this problem in one way or another.
Right.
We all have to be engaged in that.
And look, I know, and they talked about it during some of these meetings, all this doesn't fall on the city council.
Yeah, right.
All right, I know that. We know
Right.
that.
Right.
They talked about what they think you meant, right?
Right. However, and look, you guys, Councilmember Perini, I think, said it best towards the very end, a week or two ago, when he was talking about the letter, and to quote him, he said, "Well, I think it's if it's not us, then who?" And that was the exact point of the letter. Yep. And I was happy that they finally got it. I don't think maybe won't acknowledge that, but that was the whole point. And I've said it before, well, if these things are happening in the city of Hagerstown, and the city council and the mayor aren't going to stand up for it, who else is going to? Look, quite frankly, I don't feel that I really should have had to do that.
You shouldn't have.
And I honestly, obviously I'm the senator and I represent the city of Hagerstown, live in the city of Hagerstown, but most of that letter, really, guys, it came from Citizen Corderman. Someone who's grown up in this community, lived here most of my life, has a business here, and I think that's why it resonated, because I said what a lot of people were feeling. And at the end of the day, let's have the conversation, let's keep it going, and hopefully we can work towards a better community. That's the whole goal.
But no one wanted to know who was to blame. They wanted to know what were you going to do about it.
And that's the best case scenario.
Right.
We shouldn't try to establish blame. Let's just fix it.
Right.
Right.
Let's take a break.
All right. Well, there's some other things we want to cover, and probably the only issue bigger than your letter and those issues is probably transportation. So I'd love for us to touch on that when we come back.
Absolutely.
Stay with us. We'll have more FlipSide after the break. Welcome back to the show. Senator Corderman, thank you for staying with us. Picking up where we left off, one of the other major issues in our community is transportation, the issues that we see on I-81. I know that some state officials were here earlier in the summer, and there's been conversations going on. Where do things stand, and where do you see them going?
So over the summer, Secretary Weederfield came up for what we call the road show. It was the CTP, which is a Consolidated Transportation Plan, was laid out. And when we're talking about 81, where we're at right now is 81's not going to be done. We're in the phase 2 right now. The planning, the money is pretty much ran out unless they put some more in there. And so that's the concern. 2 years ago, we had money in there for construction, design, and planning. Last year, they took the construction money away. Now they've taken the design money away. So our push, collectively, when I say ours, is everyone in this community, not just the delegation, but is to restore that funding so we can get the next phase funded, finish the design work, hopefully then get some construction money. Governor Moore was up here not too long afterwards. He said all the right things. He said we need to get this done, which everyone agrees with, but he just didn't say when it was going to be done.
Right.
And so that's the concern. I really think it's going to take more of an effort here from a community aspect of putting a little bit more pressure in a respectful way. But I think it's leveraging all the different community partners here, not just our local electeds, but also the Chamber of Commerce, Greater Hagerstown, different civic organizations to really kind of rally together. We have a day down in Annapolis. It's called Washington County Day, where a lot of people come down. We have a lot of meetings with folks of that nature. I'm hopeful we can maybe use that opportunity to make a more impactful statement of why 81 needs to get done. We're out here in Western Maryland. We're not in the central part of the state. When these things happen that impact all of us that we see each and every day, they don't impact those folks downstate. So we really need to kind of put it in their face, I think, a little bit more. Had a meeting with Secretary Grady here just 2 weeks ago, who's a transportation secretary. Explained to her again, this is obviously the number one priority. It's been the number one priority here for many, many years. And so, look, I'm committed to getting it done. As I've said to folks before, they told us we'd never build a ballpark in downtown Hagerstown. Well, we did that. So they can tell us we're not going to get 81 done, but we're going to get it done. It just might take some time, but I'm committed to it and look forward to continuing those conversations.
You say that it doesn't impact, but the Economic Development Commission here in Washington County used to call us the crossroads of commerce because of Interstate 81 and 70. So I would argue that it does impact.
Yeah, I guess what I mean by that, I mean about the impact as far as the everyday thing. Like
it's not top of mind.
Right. When we have an accident happens here and the whole community is shut down and Williamsport is backed up everywhere and it's a you can't get across town, you can't pick your kids up, things of that nature. That's what I'm saying, that doesn't impact them. From an economy standpoint, absolutely it can impact them, especially if it's not able to utilize it in an efficient manner.
President-elect Trump has suggested that infrastructure is going to be a big part of what his priorities are. Do you think there's any help to be gotten from the federal government?
Well, it's not the federal government. Let's be clear here. The money's there. We just need the state money to leverage the federal match. Politics are what they are. There's a lot of money the previous administration from the federal level put into infrastructure. We just have to be able to tap into that. That's where the frustration lies here. When you really break the numbers down, Jim, you're talking about a couple $1 million here from the state to leverage tens of millions of dollars. And you can draw that out over a couple years. I met with the county here recently. They have it broken down almost to, it's less than like $1 million a year. We should be able to come up with $1 million a year in the state of Maryland to get 81 going again. That's the argument, and that's the push we're going to continue to make.
It was a $5 billion infrastructure bill that states across the country have taken advantage of. And we can talk dollars and cents as much as we want, and I've been in a lot of rooms where we've educated business owners and leaders on the math and the numbers and why, but ultimately it comes down to the lives that we've lost on 81.
Sure.
And the lives that we may lose in the interim of solving this and putting the solution in place. Yes, it's probably one of the shortest strips on 81, but alone, how many lives have we lost in the last couple of years?
Yeah, and to your point there, if the design work doesn't get implemented and this delays us another year, we'll probably lose 2 or 3 more lives next year, just off the top, because that's what we're averaging right now in fatalities over the last couple of years.
Exactly.
So the next phase, as it was originally envisioned, what does that get us?
Phase two runs from where it stops right now. You have the bridge and the first about mile in. Phase 2 goes up to a little bit past halfway.
Exit
And then
5.
after that is phase 3 and 4, which 3 and 4 they've kind of combined into one phase now. They still call it 3 and 4, but they were previously looking to do all the design work at once, which then takes you from halfway up to around maybe Cedar Falls, and then Cedar Falls, the state line, is phase 4. It has to get done. It has to. We can debate, as far as when and the time frame, but it has to get done.
Senator Corderman, from a state level, what other issues are top of mind for you
Thank you.
that you feel need to be addressed that really impact our community?
Well, I think you'll see, again, the budget's going to be the number one going into it, just because the structural deficit issue we have. But I think you're going to see a lot of the same things come up because they're a concern, I think, of a lot of Marylanders, not just where we live, but across the state. And we're talking about that as public safety, juvenile crime, things of that nature. We've talked about, previously about what was on the ballot was women's rights. The constitutional amendment had to do with abortion. So I don't think we'll see as much as that one, but I think you're still going to see a lot of concerns and conversations about public safety in regards, and also to the economy as well.
Can I put one thing on your list?
Absolutely. Just one?
Just one.
All right. You heard me now. I only got one thing to share.
That's a day.
So this volleyball cycle, Washington County had 4 teams in the state finals,
They
3
did.
of them winning championships.
It is.
So what about a declaration that Washington County is known as Title Town
There you go. I like
during the
that.
month of November?
Not bad. Not bad at
I'll
all.
come down and testify.
Look, I look forward to having, I represent District 2, as you all know, which is the eastern half of Washington County. So I'm proud to be supportive of not only Boonesboro, who won, but also North High, which is my alma mater. We had North High down last year. Look forward to inviting North High and Boonesboro down to celebrate their achievements.
And Williamsport, even though they're not in your district,
Williamsport will be there.
Now who's responsible for
That'll be Senator
Williamsport?
McKay.
Senator
Yeah,
McKay?
and I've already talked to Senator McKay about it, and I'm sure he'll extend that invitation, and they'll be down as well. So, no, we're excited about that. It's tremendous. We love that opportunity anytime we can showcase our young people in the state, and it's a great opportunity for them too. I think they'll have a good time.
Well, we have a project coming into place. It's supposed to start in January as well. The indoor sports complex. Is that on par? Have you heard anything about that? What's the buzz?
The
looking
field
like?
house in the city?
Yes.
Terrence, I don't know the exact timeline on that. The last I had heard of that, I know they were trying
It's
to have it
been
open.
pushed out a few
It's been
times.
pushed out, exactly. And so I don't know the current timeline. Last I had heard it was they were hoping to open in the fall, which we're right in the middle of the fall right now, or you could argue towards the end of the fall. So I don't know the timeline on that.
Because I just got an email asking to get advanced membership.
Okay.
For January. So, but I haven't heard anything publicly outside of that kind of marketing. So I didn't know
Right.
if that was in the purview of what's going on.
Sure.
Okay.
Yep.
If we can return to the notion of the economy and employment, Maryland in October had an unemployment rate of 3%, which was second only to Virginia, which was at 2.9%. Terrence tells us all the time that winter is here, but you can't really tell that from our unemployment rate. Do you believe those numbers, or are there, and if so, how do you explain that?
Well, I'm not going to say I don't believe the numbers. The numbers are what they are. What I think it goes back to is some of the conversations we had earlier of the type of worker and what jobs we're trying to fill. We talked earlier how the Maryland economy is reliant heavily on the federal government. So you talked about Virginia and Maryland. I think there's no surprise there. Both those states obviously surround the capital, have a lot of federal workers. I think what we're having a hard time is finding some workers for some of the other jobs, more of a, whatever they may be outside of that. So I think that's kind of the difference there.
And that number also, and we heard from a economist that comes into the community, that number is also impacted because you have to be actively looking for a job for the unemployment number. And a lot of people aren't looking for jobs in the state of Maryland anymore. They're looking for jobs outside the state, which reduces the number and does us a disservice because it looks like we're better than what we are. Winter is definitely here. But he also reiterated something we said, there's a class recession that we're dealing with. The top 50% may be okay right now, but the bottom 50% of our economy is truly suffering.
Yeah, the impacts of inflation and those things, it increases the gap between the have and the have-nots.
It absolutely does.
If you're not participating in the stock market, if you don't own a home, what do you own that is keeping pace or outpacing inflation? Basically.
Well, I think it's more basic than that. I mean, I went to fill my oil tank for the year, and it was $3,200 in one shot, right? That'll last me probably through February, but luckily I can afford that. But how many can't?
My dog food went up to $78.
Yeah, exactly.
That's up $20 from where it was this time last year.
But your dog gets spot treatments, Terrence.
Listen, don't talk about Kobe. Listen, I'm just saying he needs food too. But I'm just saying grocery bills on a whole for everyone, even pets. But as a whole, the grocery bill, the price of milk, the price of food, and we've seen that packages getting smaller and prices getting larger as well. But you still have to feed your family, and that's where it's being felt.
Yep, the cost of goods has just gone up across the board.
Yes.
Yep.
The Maryland Chamber highlights the need for increased child care availability. Is that something that's being discussed at the state level?
Oh yeah, big time. And so part of we talked about earlier, part of the deficiencies or deficits we're running right now with the structural deficit. In the entitlement section, we talked about Medicaid. The child care subsidy is a big part of it too. We give out child care scholarships, for folks that are in need for child care, which is a needed thing because the debate is if we can have child care, that allows then the families to go work. And so, but we don't have enough child care places for all the children. I know here locally there's been a conversation with Easter Seals about redeveloping the old Locust Street School where ABC was construction and turn that into a child care center. Matter of fact, we had a conversation with Secretary Grady about that just 2 weeks ago. And so, again, to answer your question, absolutely, the child care need is huge in the state, whether it's public or private, whatever it may be, it's needed. There's no question about it.
And to piggyback on that, Jim, we talked about the return back to work. You mentioned that. That increases the demand. I know a lot of corporations, a lot of businesses are now demanding that employees come back to work 3 days at least a week.
Right.
So
you
now
need someone to watch the kids.
Who's watching the
That's
kids, right? And the cost of childcare also increases. So that puts a financial burden.
And that's a lot of the supply and demand because we don't have enough childcare folks or childcare places out there, which drives that cost up. It's tough.
Yeah, and with the economy in the state that it's been for many years, it's very tough to have a stay-at-home parent. You need two-parent households, or two-income households from that standpoint.
So can I steal a question here real quick? What's your outlook on housing?
On housing?
Yes.
We need housing too. That's
that's a great outlook.
Well, I mean, the outlook is
that was very profound.
The outlook is we haven't been building housing. That's the obvious thing.
Right.
So we need housing at all different levels. I mean, we all live in this community. What housing developments do you see? You see some here and there, but not nearly to the point that we need. The housing stock that we have, again, the price on it has been driven up because there's a scarcity of it. The governor has been committed to housing. I mean, when you look at, we talk about budgets and things like that. The Department of Housing and Community Development had the largest capital budget that I've ever seen in my 8 years down there, and the largest of any of the other entities there. And so they've committed. Now, look, it's not going to happen overnight. So there is a strong commitment from the governor to work towards more affordable housing, workforce housing, things of those nature. But again, it takes a long time to build that. Now,
But within our community, does solving the water issue go hand in hand with housing?
it's part of it.
Good
That's a
point,
big
yeah.
part of it. Yeah, absolutely, it's a big part of it. And then we can really get into the weeds of it with housing, as you'll see a lot of, not as much here, but if you go to our one county over in Allegheny County and look at how their population has decreased, Cumberland, Greater Cumberland, is pretty much the same. They just moved to the other side of the river.
Yeah.
They built all kinds of houses over there, but people left out of Cumberland when they're there because, and that's where we really get into the weeds of, regulation and things of that nature of, it's a little more, cost effective for the builders.
So are
to
you
build
saying
housing.
that they've moved to kind of just West Virginia, like Ridgely, West Virginia, and those areas that are around?
Yeah,
the
I mean,
Cumberland
literally
area?
right across
Yeah.
the river.
And that- they
Mineral
had a-
County, I think it is.
Yeah.
Mineral County has grown, exponentially compared to Allegheny.
Kaiser,
if you look
Fort
at 'em,
Ashby, those
whatever
areas.
Allegheny County has decreased, I bet if you look at Mineral County, it's probably
they're
equally
picking it up.
increased
Yeah.
or the same. The
And it's
overall
a-
population's around the same. They've just shifted.
And there's an incentive. They were offering what, $10,000 for
Well,
people.
that's in Cumberland now. Yeah,
Right.
exactly. Yeah. If you would move there, actually, I think it might have been 20.
Yep.
If you move to Cumberland.
The other interesting thing, I was helping a friend look for an apartment, and I live in a 3-bedroom house. It's 4,000 square feet, and I know what my mortgage is, and I'm seeing these 2-bedroom apartments that are more than my mortgage.
Sure.
And I'm thinking, wow, when did that happen? So again, to the lower part, 50% of the income earners in our county and our state, that's huge.
It's not affordable, and the scarcity of it, which is then just continues to drive the price, the whole supply and demand.
So that's what I'm saying. How can winter not be here when you can't afford food, housing, and childcare?
Fair point.
That's a good point. Yeah, absolutely.
And your dog can only go to the spa once.
he was setting us up with that one, I think. He worked that one in well. Well done, Terrence.
And we're back to the generic dog food, right?
Yeah, it's tough at Terrence.
No.
Well, Senator Corderman, we appreciate you coming on, especially before your busy season really starts. And we're hopeful that there's going to be some conversations with your new counterparts where you can have some things to take to Annapolis and move things forward. And you've put out the call to the community that when Washington County Day comes, there needs to be more support.
Yeah, I'd like to
rally
see
around the
some
81
organization around that. And we've had some preliminary conversations with some groups before about some ideas and things to do. And I think that's just an opportunity. Look, the community, a lot of the community comes down there already. Look, we'll know between now and then, really, when the budget comes out, kind of where we stand, so to speak.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful that money will be restored here in the next month or two when the budget comes out. But nothing's guaranteed.
And we're
obviously.
talking about basically 2 months from today, right? Because it's normally that third week of January.
As far as when the Washington County Day is,
Yes.
it's usually towards the end of January. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the budget will be out before then, so we'll know.
Right.
Before then, for certain.
Right.
So we've still got a couple of minutes left here. Can we turn for a minute and have you talk to us about your thoughts about the new administration's policies at the national level and how they might impact? I know we've talked about a couple of them, but whether it's economic and energy, environmental, healthcare, what do you think is going to be the big wins for Maryland, and what do you think could cause us grief?
Well, I mean, I guess which one do you want to talk about specifically? I mean, you have a number of different ones there, but
Yeah, let's talk about economic.
okay.
Extending the tax cuts from 2017.
Well, look, I can't speak specifically on what the federal government, what the administration is going to do.
Right.
But I think that we can all agree to a certain point that, well, maybe we won't all agree on this, but what I'll say is the economy was in a much better place before the previous administration, and so I'm hoping we can return to some of those things. As far as what tax cuts look like, we want something that's obviously going to help the middle class, help the folks that you're talking about, the lower 50%, because you have the haves and the have-nots. The haves are going to be fine.
Right.
The
Yes, they
have-nots
are.
is what we really need to focus on, and so I'm hopeful that there is an attention to that from the federal level and from the state level also. As I'm going down a couple of these other things that you just mentioned there, energy I think is a very interesting one. As far as how and what we can do about energy production and how does that balance in the state of Maryland with the climate things that we've put into place. And I'd say that I think what we've put into place is kind of counterproductive to what we need as Marylanders and as basically a society right now. Look, we all want clean energy. I don't care if you're Republican or Democrat. We want clean energy. I think that is the future. But the reality is we're not quite there yet. You know, with all the wind turbines and the solar and all those type of things. Nuclear, we definitely need to invest in nuclear. We have to invest in it.
That's controversial, though.
It is, but you can do smaller ones also. But what I was getting, there's other ones, the more cleaner energy ones that people, tend to lean towards as far as, the wind and the solar and things of that nature. You can't store them. They're not reliable. And so we're just not there yet. And so to that I say we have to, look, let's say you embrace fossil fuels, but you can't turn them away because that's what we have. We are energy, I guess we're not energy independent. We don't create any energy in the state anymore other than the nuclear down at Calvert Cliffs.
Yep.
We import tons of energy. People's electric bills are already starting to go up. They're going to go huge in the next year or so. You're talking hundreds of dollars a year going up. We're not producing it. We're selling all our credits out of state. It's just, I would like to see energy companies get back into generating power in the state of Maryland, but we got to find a way that's kind of that everyone can agree on, and that's the challenge right now.
What about the notion of the manufacturing economy? I know that President-elect Trump has focused on that his first term. Do you think there's benefit? I know we have some manufacturing in Maryland. We were fortunate just recently to get some more. Where do you think that might go?
Look, anytime we can increase manufacturing in the state's obviously going to be a positive. I think the challenge is, again, and I don't know if it's manufacturing specifically, but it's what we talked about earlier, we've driven business out of the state. Some businesses are coming in. Again, around here we have an explosion in logistical business, but all those products out of those warehouses, they're not made in our state. They're made somewhere else and they're brought in, by truck or train and completed things of that nature.
Yes.
I think we would all like to see manufacturing come back, not just in the state and the country. But again, that's obviously more of probably a federal conversation. We can do some things here locally also, on the state level and even on the local level. We had a conversation with the county just the other day. They may introduce, and I don't want to speak for them because it's not out there yet, but some sort of tax credit to try to incentivize economic development in our community. I think those are the things we need to be focusing on. That's a couple of things I'll be looking on myself as we go back to Annapolis from a legislative perspective that we can do here locally.
But nationally, we'll still be impacted by tariffs.
Oh,
manufacturing.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, we will, absolutely. Look, the reality is, China, everything's going to come from China. That's just what it is. Not everything, but a lot of
China, right?
And so that's going to continue to happen. That's just the reality of the world.
Last thing I have is on education. He's talking about downsizing education at the national level, which would obviously push some of that back to the states. We know with Kerwin, we're already strapped for what the future looks like in terms of funding. How does that impact Maryland?
Well, I think on all these things, it'll depend on what actually he does. He being, the president of that administration. They named a secretary, of education. A week ago, they were talking about not even having that. So at least that's a good start. At least they got somebody there.
Nice redirection, right?
That being said, Jim, look, it's a lot of it's going to be wait and see. I think on all these things, it's going to be a really busy first day for him because of all these things that he has said. He being, the president-elect, day one this is going to happen. Day one that's going to happen. Let's just slow down a second here and wait to see what actually happens. Because look, here's the thing I say to folks also. He was the president before, right? For 4 years.
Right.
Did all these things happen? Not all of them. Some things did. So is it going to be different? It's not going to be the same.
It's a lot of throwing against the wall.
Yeah.
But the first time he was surprised he won it too.
Right. He was. No, I think you're right about that. I think there's a more preparedness coming in this time.
Absolutely.
And he's got the Congress and the Senate.
Sure, and you had the old adage of, hey, if I had to do it over again, I'd do it this way. So I think I'm hopeful it's going to be a little more productive. And definitely more productive hopefully with the House and Senate, because he had the House and the Senate the first 2 years in 16.
That's right.
And not a whole lot got done.
That's true. Good
so,
point.
We're going to have to wait and see on some of these things.
Absolutely.
Wrap us up.
Thank you, Senator Corderman.
Absolutely.
We'll talk to you again soon. And
Anytime.
Thank you for the hidden treats we won't talk about.
That's right. Yep. So I appreciate you guys having me. And as we lead out, go Warriors and go Hubs.
There you go.
Thank you.
Well, that's all the time that we have for tonight. We hope that you'll like us on Facebook, follow us on X, and send us your comments to feedback@theflipsidetv.com. That is feedback@theflipsidetv.com. But most importantly, join us again next week for another episode of